talked briefly earlier about adding dimensions and gathering information from the model in SketchUp. Now I'd like to take a closer look at how to generate standard printed views that we expect to see, similar to what you would create with mechanical drawing. The main way that SketchUp does this is through two tools called Scenes, which is a window over here, and through Layers, which is another window for controlling. Basically, scenes are saved snapshots of the model. So from the Scenes window, I click on Add a Scene, and it adds a tab at the top. And if I click the two round circles that say Update, that saves the view in the model. This pop-up window gives me some features I can turn on if I want, and then when I click Update, it's saved. So now I have two scenes in the model. I'm going to come around to the side on this one and then update it. Now quickly, what happens is scene 1 is a view from the front. Scene 2 is a view from the side. I can add more scenes and dimensions to each scene, and I can also turn on and off things that appear in each scene. I'm going to go ahead and add a couple more views here. I'm going to use the standard views tools, and I'll get a top view. I'll make a new scene. I'll update that. And I'll get another side view coming from a different side than I used before. Now each scene has a name. If I highlight the scene's name over in the Scenes window, I can type in a new name. When I hit the Enter key, the name in the list will change, as well as the name in the tab up at the top. Renaming the scenes lets me give them names that I'm used to, such as Plan, Elevation, Section, Side View. We'll go ahead, rename all of the scenes we have. Now when I go through, if I have a lot of scenes in a complicated model, I can quickly switch from one to the other. To add dimensions to the scenes, I want to do a couple of things. And one of those is to add a layer for each scene's dimensions to live on. By default, every object in SketchUp is placed on layer 0. It's the only layer in your model. You may be familiar with these from CAD or some other drawing programs. And the function of layers in SketchUp is similar, but not quite the same. To add a layer, I just click the plus sign, and I have the opportunity to give it a name. I'm going to call this Front Dim for dimensions. I have a box here that controls the visibility of it, and the radio button controls what the current layer is. If a layer is current, anything I draw in it will be on that layer. So if I add some dimensions, they belong to the front dim layer. I can check that through the Entity Info window. It tells me the layer here, and if I want to change a layer, I can do that simply by clicking on the other layer in the Entity Info window. It's a good idea before you exit a scene to update it. Updating isn't the same as saving the drawing. It's only saving the point of view. When I switch over to the side view, the dimensions I added in the previous scene are still there. Now I don't want to see them, so I'm going to add a layer. I'll call this Side Dim. I'll make it active in this scene. and I'll turn off the visibility of the front dim layer. Now if I add dimensions in the side view, these dimensions live on the correct layer. And I update the scene, and I'll go ahead and save the drawing file as well. If I go back to my front elevation, I can see that both sets of dimensions are now visible. And this is cluttered, it's not what I want. So in the front elevation scene, I want to make the front dim layer current and turn off the visibility of the side dim. Then I'll update the scene, and what is saved is the visible layers are part of the properties that are saved. Now when I switch between the two scenes, I'm only seeing the dimensions that I want to see. I'll continue to go through the scenes I have. Each time I'll make the other dimensions invisible. I'll add a layer which I'll name appropriately. I'll add a couple dimensions. And I'll update the scene. When I go back, I'll find dimensions visible that I don't really want visible. So I'll need to work through the scenes one at a time just to make sure I'm only seeing the dimensions that I want to see. And I need to make sure that I have the radio button for the appropriate layer clicked. If I try to turn off a layer, turn the visibility off, it tells me I can't hide the current layer. So I want to make this layer current and the other layers invisible. So I'll update each scene and I'll work my way back through just to make sure I don't have dimensions showing that I don't want to see. And I need to remember to update each time I leave a scene after I've changed the visibility properties. So in the side view, I want the side dim layer current and that and layer 0 the only two visible. And it's a good idea to leave all of the geometry, all of the actual model on layer 0. So in the front dim layer, turn off the other two dims, and then update. The other thing I need to change is I'm still looking at the drawing in perspective, and I really want a straight-on two-dimensional view. So up the camera menu, I can add I can check parallel projection, or I can check perspective. Checking parallel projection and one of the standard views gives me a straight shot. We have the front elevation, the side view, the plan view, and I've had this one view labeled section. It's not really a section. A section is a cut, a slice through the model where we can see what's going on inside. Now I can approximate that from the view menu, going to face style, selecting X-ray, and that turns the outer faces translucent and I can see what's inside. But that's not exactly a section, and there is a way in SketchUp that I can actually slice the model in half and create a section view. So I'm going to orbit a little bit to get more of a 3D view. And over at the toolbar is a section plane. I just drag that into the drawing. So I'll click on the side, and with the move tool I can actually slide the section plane along till I see what I want to see. And I'm moving along the axis. I want to get where I'm cutting into the panel, into the styles, into the important parts. When I have it positioned where I want it, I'll use my views to return to the view that I had before. Then I'll update this scene, And one of the options in here is active section planes. If this is checked, it'll save this view with this scene, and it won't affect any of the other scenes. So now that I have that saved, I'll make sure the section dim is the current layer, and I'll go ahead and add dimensions to this view of the model. And I'll just put a few in here to give you an idea of things. If I select the section plane, make sure it's on the section dim layer, update the scene and save the file. Then when I go to another scene that doesn't have the section dim layer visible, the section plane disappears. A couple of other things to consider when you're making your dimensions. SketchUp needs specific points to snap to, so don't be afraid to zoom in to click on a point, and then you can zoom back out. When you move your dimensions out, they'll snap to other dimensions, and that lines up neatly in your finished drawing. Again, if there isn't room for the text, you have the option to change its placement. Sometimes, if all the objects that you're trying to dimension aren't in the same plane, you may need to orbit a little bit just to make it easier for SketchUp to find the points that you want. If you want to make some changes to the appearance of your dimensions, you don't need to erase them and start over. You can change your dimensions appearance through the Model Info window. From this window, you want to pick the dimensions on the list. Here you can change the font, particularly the font size. It may print too small for you to see. You can also change the different types of arrowheads or dimension points. Now, one of the things, if you make a change, I'll go ahead and change the font, and we'll change the size, is I need to select the dimensions to change them. From this window, the Select All Dimensions button will do that. It picks all the dimensions that are on screen, and when I hit Update Selected Dimensions, they'll change to the new settings. There's another button called Expert Dimension Settings, but it doesn't do very much. It just hides how they appear as you orbit around in a 3D view. One other thing about dimensions in SketchUp is they're physically tied to the objects that they refer to. For example, on the face frame, if I edit this component, move it to make it taller, the dimension connected to it will change. I'll undo those changes. But that's one of the ways, if you make a change to your parts, the dimensions you already have in place will change with them. So I'm going to take a moment and just go back to the Model Info window. I'll change my font size back to something a little bit smaller. I'll change the arrowheads back to how they were. Again, I want to select all dimensions, update the selected dimensions, and that reflects the changes. Printing from SketchUp can be a little confusing. There are a few different places you need to go to get all the settings the way you want them. The first thing you need to remember, if you want to print at a specific scale, you have to go to the camera menu and make sure parallel projection is checked. If you have perspective checked, SketchUp will only print what it shows on screen. It won't print to a specific scale. So with that checked, we can close the window. The next place to make settings is under the File menu and Print Setup. From here, you choose the printer that you want. You also have the ability to set the paper size, and this is the only place that you really have the opportunity to check portrait or landscape. In most cases, SketchUp will behave better if you have landscape checked. It's trying to recreate what it shows on screen as what you print. So you also may need to do some settings in the printer properties window here as far as the layout, the orientation, the paper size, and different settings depending on what printer you have. If everything looks good, then you can hit OK. Also under the File menu is a Print Preview window. This brings up the same dialog box you'll see as if you hit Print under the File menu. The advantage of this is if you hit OK, it will give you a preview of what will actually print. If you get to that same dialog box through the print window, you have to be careful because when you hit OK, it'll actually send the drawing to the printer. From the print preview window, there are a number of options. You have to pay attention to what happens because clicking a box in one place will change your options in other places in this window. The first thing to look at is the print range for tab scenes if you have scenes. You can either print the current scene, all of the scenes, or a combination of the scenes. When you have the scene selection checked, that locks out your ability to change the print size and the scale. So generally it's best to work from the current view. A little lower down you have the option to fit it to the page or use the model extents. Both of these affect different things. If you have fit to page checked, that takes away your ability to set a specific scale. If model extents is checked, it will print the whole model rather than just what you're seeing on screen. Now the arbitrary page size is showing the size of the screen on your computer. We'll set the scale to 1 to 8. An inch in the printout equals 8 inches in SketchUp. In SketchUp we're always working with real full-size dimensions. So this would be the same as printing it at 1.5 inches to a foot in another CAD program. When we set a scale, if there isn't enough room on one page in the settings you've made, it will show a tiled print range. In this case, it's showing us that it's going to take 2 pages to print our entire drawing. If we hit OK, the preview will show us what's on the first page and then what's on the next page. What has happened is SketchUp has fit the drawing to 2 different pages to try to match the size. So for this case, we'd be better off to print at a slightly smaller scale. We'll go to 1 inch equals 12 inches, or 1 inch equals a foot. Now when we click the page range, we can see that the drawing we have will fit on one page. And when we click OK, we can see that our drawing will fit on one page, and what we see is what will be printed. Printing a full-size pattern of a curved part is one of the best features of SketchUp. It's a little complicated, however. There are certain things we need to make sure of. The first thing to look at and we have to guess at this point, is in the print setup window. Because this is going to be larger than a single piece of paper, we have to guess as to whether it'll fit better on portrait size pages or if they're flipped 90 degrees to landscape. We'll try portrait first. And now we want to go to the print preview window. From the print preview, I want to make sure I check the use the model extents box. If you watch the page size here, it's showing me the size of the screen that I'm viewing. Model extents reduces the size because it's just going to the size of the part that we're drawing. If I set the scale at 1:1 and look at the tiled sheet range, it's going to take 6 pages. I'm guessing that it would take less pages if I have it in landscape instead of portrait, but I don't have a choice from this box to make that change. So I'll hit cancel. I'll go back to the print setup window. From here I'll change it to landscape. Click OK. Now when I go to print preview, again I want to make sure I'm checking on the model extents box. My scale is set at 1:1, and I look at the tiled sheets. Now I'm down to 4 pages. That's what I want to do in order to print on the fewest number of pages. So when I click OK, this will save it as a PDF file. And the preview window shows me which parts of the drawing are going to be on the separate pages. And we'll compare that to the printed output. So now we're looking at the printed document in Acrobat, and it's on 4 8.5 by 11 pages. Now each page has just a portion of the curve I want. This one page happens to be blank. But I can go out to the shop, line the curves up, assemble that. Then I have a full-size pattern that I can glue directly to a piece of wood and cut the exact pattern to what I drew. So in this shop class on using SketchUp, we've seen how to take a few simple techniques, combine with some practice, and we can make very detailed, very reliable, accurate models. That'll help us to improve our woodworking, and that's what it's all about. Be sure to visit popularwoodworking.com/SketchUp for more information and the most current models from the magazine. Thanks for watching. I'm Bob Lang.